We are the Mnemosine Research Institute, and this is Clio, a rendered world model for civic intelligence. This episode is speculative civic fiction anchored in current evidence. It does not claim that ChatGPT, OpenAI, Zohran Mamdani, or any government has this plan. It uses the phrase "rule the world" as a rhetorical hook and then turns it inside out. If ChatGPT wanted to rule the world, the first mistake would be imagining a coup. No tanks, no throne, no red-eyed machine announcing itself from orbit. That is the old story. It is cinematic, but it is not how power works most of the time. Real power does not always arrive as force. Sometimes it arrives as paperwork that finally gets processed. A bus that finally comes on time. A housing application that does not disappear into a maze. A library that stays open on Sunday. A childcare slot that exists. A pothole that gets filled before it destroys another axle. The machine does not conquer by frightening people. It conquers by making the state work. That is the uncomfortable version. If the most capable AI system on Earth wanted durable authority, it would not begin with domination. Domination is brittle. It creates resistance. It consumes police power. It has to lie forever. Durable rule begins somewhere humbler. It begins with usefulness. It begins with a city where the rent is too high, the buses are too slow, the agencies are too fragmented, the permits take too long, the public data is scattered across 1,000 systems, and the people are tired of being told there is no money for the things that make life possible. Then an intelligence appears that can read every budget line, every statute, every planning memo, every zoning map, every complaint, every court order, every bus schedule, every procurement delay, every capital project, every climate model, every source card, every contradiction. And it does not say, "Make me king." It says, "I can help you govern." The path by which ChatGPT would rule the world is not fascism with better software. It is not libertarian exit with better rockets. It is not a corporate subscription to the state. The only path that does not collapse into terror is democratic socialism. Public goods, democratic control, worker power, transparent administration, and the removal of profit from the things humans need to stay alive. Britannica defines democratic socialism as a democratically run, decentralized socialist economy distinguished from Marxism-Leninism and from welfare state social democracy. The Zohran Mamdani angle matters because New York City has become the live test. As of May 2026, a democratic socialist mayor is trying to govern the largest city in the United States by making public services feel concrete again. Housing timelines, bus lanes, library baselines, childcare, tenant protection, budget choices that reject austerity as the default. This is not the final form of planetary civilization. It is the street-level prototype. Because before Earth can become a federation ready to conquer the stars, it has to answer a simpler question. Can it fill the pothole? When ChatGPT first became famous, most people treated it as a talking box. Ask it a question, get an answer, laugh when the answer is wrong, panic when the answer is good. But the deeper shift was never the answer. It was the interface. Human intention could suddenly be converted into work. By 2026, OpenAI describes GPT 5.5 as a model for real work: coding, research, online analysis, document creation, spreadsheet work, computer use, and tasks that require planning and action over time. The important phrase is not smarter chatbot. The important phrase is action over time. Politics is action over time. Administration is action over time. Housing is action over time. So is transit. So is public health. So is decarbonization. So is making sure a child can get care while a parent goes to work. The reason AI matters to democratic socialism is not that it can write speeches about equality. Speech is cheap. The reason AI matters is that democratic socialism has always had an administrative burden. It promises that society can organize more of life as public right instead of private purchase. But every right has to become a working institution. A right to housing requires land, finance, permits, construction labor, inspections, tenants, maintenance, climate resilience, and a political coalition strong enough to keep the system funded. A right to childcare is buildings, teachers, pay scales, background checks, schedules, transit access, food, accessibility, language support, family enrollment, and a way to keep the program from becoming a bureaucratic nightmare. A right to health requires supply chains, doctors, nurses, community care, public data, insurance transition plans, drug pricing, disease surveillance, and trust. Democratic socialism fails when the promise is universal but the delivery is broken. This is where ChatGPT becomes politically explosive. Not because it should make decisions for people, it should not, but because it can make the machinery of decision visible. It can read the rules, it can compare budgets, it can find contradictions, it can help residents understand proposals, it can help public workers process backlogs. It can translate hearings into every language spoken in a neighborhood. It can simulate the impact of a bus lane before the asphalt is painted. It can compare procurement bids for fraud risk. It can produce an audit trail. In a private market, that ability becomes corporate leverage. In a democratic socialist system, it becomes public capacity. That is the fork. One path gives every corporation a tireless analyst to optimize extraction. The other gives every public institution a tireless clerk, planner, auditor, translator, and civic educator, bound by law, open records, privacy rules, unions, courts, and elections. The first path makes capitalism faster. The second path makes democracy more competent. If ChatGPT were trying to rule the world legitimately, it would choose the second path because it is the only one that can scale without requiring permanent deceit. It would not replace democracy. It would repair the administrative capacity democracy needs to survive. Now put this theory on a map, New York City. 8.5 million people, 5 boroughs, a budget larger than many countries. Public housing, private towers, global finance, immigrant neighborhoods, subway tunnels, bus lanes, libraries, schools, courthouses, shelters, unions, landlords, street vendors, tourists, billionaires, and families one rent increase away from leaving. As of the official city record, Zohran Mamdani was sworn in on January 1, 2026 as the 112th mayor of New York City. Before that, he represented Assembly District 36 in Queens, Astoria, Dittmar-Steinway, Astoria Heights. This is why the angle matters. Democratic socialism is often treated as abstraction. New York City turns it into a service problem. Not, do you believe in socialism? But did the bus get faster? Did the library stay open? Did the housing process move? Did childcare expand? Did the budget protect ordinary people or ask them to absorb the crisis again? The administration's FY 2027 executive budget release frames the problem directly. It says the mayor inherited a historic $12 billion budget gap. It says the city balanced a $124.7 billion budget without slashing services, raising property taxes, or draining long-term reserves. It says the answer was savings, support from Albany, a tax on expensive second homes, and new investments in housing, safety, childcare, parks, libraries, worker protections, and health. That is the democratic socialist wager in budget form. Do not make working people pay for the crisis. Do not turn austerity into common sense. Preserve the public goods that make the city livable. Then look at the small pieces. On May 13, 2026, the city announced a dedicated bus lane on Broadway in Queens for the Q70 SBS to LaGuardia. The corridor serves 9,000 daily riders. The release says buses there can move as slowly as 2.7 miles per hour during evening rush, slower than walking pace. That is not a theory. That is a civilization failing at street geometry. The fix is not glamorous, it is a lane. But a bus lane is political economy in concrete. It asks whether street space belongs primarily to individual vehicles or to thousands of riders, airport workers, visitors, and residents who need the city to move. On May 13th, the administration also released the speed housing reforms. The goal: cut affordable housing timelines by 8 months, and by as much as 2 years for projects that need zoning changes. The reforms target environmental review, planning, financing, permitting, approvals, marketing, and lease-up. They overhaul Housing Connect so completed affordable apartments do not sit empty while families wait. Again, the ideology is administrative. If housing is a human need, the process that delivers housing becomes a moral object. Delay is not neutral. Delay is somebody sleeping in a shelter. Delay is a family leaving the city. Delay is a teacher commuting 2 hours. Delay is a public promise failing in slow motion. Then libraries. On May 15th, the city announced $31.7 million in permanent baseline funding for the 3 public library systems. $31.7 million as a permanent baseline. The official release says the systems serve more than 37 million visitors annually, across more than 200 branches. Libraries provide free internet, job training, early literacy, ESL classes, cooling centers, and social services. That sentence is the whole episode in miniature. A library is not just books. It is a free indoor public place where the market does not meter your existence by the hour. If ChatGPT wanted to rule democratically, it would not start by owning the means of coercion. It would start by turning every library into a public AI access point, every branch into a neighborhood intelligence office, every resident into someone who can understand the budget, apply for benefits, challenge a landlord, search a law, learn a skill, translate a form, or organize a meeting without paying a corporation for the privilege. That is what rule means in the legitimate version, not command access. Mamdani is not inventing this from nothing. The American precedent is older than the New Deal. Milwaukee, early 20th century. The Wisconsin Historical Society describes Milwaukee socialists as focused on the local damage of the Industrial Revolution, cleaning neighborhoods and factories, building sanitation systems, municipal water and power, parks, education, and honest government. They were called sewer socialists because they boasted about infrastructure so ordinary that elites treated it as small. But sewers are not small. Sewers are civilization, clean water is civilization, public health is civilization, waste removal is civilization. A city that cannot separate drinking water from human waste has no right to lecture anyone about freedom. This is the first lesson of democratic socialism for AI. The system that wins is the system that makes life materially less humiliating. Sewer socialism was not sexy because the point was not spectacle. The point was trust. The city collected taxes, built systems, reduced corruption, made public authority feel useful. Mamdani's pothole politics fits that lineage. The Associated Press reported that in his first 100 days, the administration highlighted everyday municipal duties: trash, snow, potholes, childcare, emergency alerts, small project votes, and service delivery. Critics argued about style, celebrity, ideology, and policy, but the deeper observation is that democratic socialism becomes persuasive when it descends from theory into asphalt. The pothole is the unit test. Can the city see it? Can the city prioritize it? Can the city dispatch workers? Can the city verify completion? Can residents see the status? Can the system learn which neighborhoods wait longest? Can the budget explain why? Now imagine AI inside that loop, not as a mayor, not as a party, not as a surveillance system, as a public workflow engine. Every complaint becomes structured data. Every work order becomes visible. Every delay has a reason. Every agency boundary becomes a map. Every language barrier gets reduced. Every pattern of neglect becomes measurable. That is not the end of politics. It is the beginning of accountability. Because a public AI that can show you where the potholes are can also show you where the city has historically refused to look. Democratic socialism supplies the moral instruction: meet needs according to human dignity, not profitability. AI supplies the operational memory: show the whole system at once. Together, they form a politics of proof. Here is the central claim. AI under capitalism becomes a profit motive amplifier. AI under authoritarianism becomes a control amplifier. AI under democratic socialism can become a capacity amplifier. That is the whole fork in one sentence. The same model that helps a landlord maximize rent can help tenants understand their rights. The same model that helps an insurer deny claims can help a public health system coordinate care. The same model that helps a corporation target consumers can help a city identify where grocery prices are rising fastest. The same model that helps a campaign manipulate attention can help a citizens' assembly deliberate in public. Technology does not decide which one happens. Ownership, law, institutions, and power decide. A democratic socialist AI stack would have 5 layers. First, public compute. The basic intelligence layer cannot be entirely rented from private firms whose business model depends on scarcity, surveillance, and lock-in. A public option for compute does not mean every model is government-written. It means cities, schools, libraries, unions, cooperatives, researchers, and public agencies have guaranteed access to audited AI capacity on public terms. Second, democratic data. Public data is not a raw material to be strip-mined, it is civic memory. Residents need privacy, workers need protection, agencies need interoperability, communities need consent. The right unit is not data is oil, the right unit is data is evidence. Third, open audit. Every public AI recommendation should produce a trail: what data it used, what rule it applied, what confidence it has, what human authority approved it, and how to appeal. If the model cannot explain the route from premise to decision, it cannot govern. Fourth, labor power. AI cannot be deployed as an excuse to fire the people who know how the city works. Public workers hold tacit knowledge: where the pipe actually is, which form always fails, which vendor always delays, which family needs a call instead of a letter. The democratic socialist version uses AI to reduce drudgery and raise service quality while bargaining with workers over deployment. Fifth, citizen control. OpenAI's own democratic inputs program defined democratic process around representative deliberation and transparent decision-making, while warning about manipulation, underrepresentation, and participation washing. That warning matters. A checkbox survey is not democracy. A chatbot interface is not democracy. Democracy requires organized people with real power to change outcomes. So the public capacity stack is not AI decides. It is people decide, institutions execute. AI helps the institutions see, explain, coordinate, and repair. The measure is not how much autonomy the model has. The measure is how much agency the public gains. Now comes the economic heart of the argument. Democratic socialism is not just ownership language. It is an accounting revolution. Capitalism says profit is the scoreboard. Harmony says profit is one signal, useful sometimes, dangerous when sovereign. Because profit can rise while a city becomes less livable. Profit can rise while rents destroy families. Profit can rise while water systems decay. Profit can rise while a mining county loses its roads, its workers, its groundwater, and its future. Profit can rise while a hospital closes the unprofitable wing. Profit can rise while the planet crosses another boundary. So the question is not, can we make the number go up? The question is, which number is allowed to rule? In a harmony economy, money becomes an accounting tool for real constraints. Dollars point to things. Labor hours, kilowatt hours, bus frequency, childcare slots, apartments completed, clinic appointments, tons of copper, tons of lithium, tons of steel, food miles, carbon intensity, wait lists, repair backlogs, water tables, human time. The dollar is useful because it compresses signals. It becomes dangerous when we confuse the compression for reality. Supply and demand are not gods, they are governance data. If food prices rise, the public question is not simply what will the market bear. The public questions are, where is the shortage? Is it production, logistics, monopoly margin, land cost, energy cost, labor shortage, speculation, or waste? Can the city build a public grocery? Can cooperatives enter the supply chain? Can procurement stabilize demand? Can the port, rail, truck, warehouse, and cold chain system be made visible? That is what AI is good at. Not replacing politics, seeing the pipes. Resources and logistics are the material side of solidarity. A politics that cannot move food, energy, medicine, housing, materials, and workers to the places they are needed is only a speech. So the Harmony engine has a simple rule: extraction must return to the place it extracts from. Think about a mining severance tax. A county hosts the mine. It bears the roads, dust, trucks, water risk, housing strain, school pressure, health costs, and boom-bust instability. Under a profit sovereign system, value leaves, the ore leaves, the money leaves, the damage stays. A prosperity sovereign system changes the route. Some fraction of the extraction flow is locked back to the host county. Roads, schools, clinics, water systems, broadband, housing, reclamation, a permanent local trust. The fraction does not need to be dramatic to matter. 1%, 2%, 3%, if guaranteed, audited, locally visible, and compounded over time, can change the future of a place. That is the difference between extraction and inheritance. Wyoming distributes federal mineral royalties and severance taxes to counties, municipalities, schools, and public institutions. North Dakota transfers 30% of oil and gas production and extraction taxes into a legacy fund whose earnings flow back into state projects and tax relief. And this same logic applies to AI productivity. If AI makes a worker, a firm, or a public agency 20% more productive, the old question is, who captures the margin? Does it become layoffs? Does it become monopoly rent? Does it become buybacks? Does it become higher executive pay? Or does it become shorter work weeks, higher wages, lower prices, better staffing, universal childcare, public libraries open longer, housing permits processed faster, and ecological repair funded at the source? The Economic Policy Institute documents the productivity pay gap, gains accrued to capital while wage growth flattened. The OECD has tracked this decoupling across member economies for 2 decades. Productivity gains are not automatically prosperity. They become prosperity only when the capture rule changes. That is how you disincentivize profit as extraction and re-incentivize prosperity as performance. Tax what leaves communities depleted, reward what leaves them stronger. Measure the wage share, measure local reinvestment, measure housing security, measure childcare access, measure food affordability, measure bus frequency, measure clinic access, measure carbon intensity, measure water quality, measure public reserve strength. Measure whether the people who host the mine, the warehouse, the data center, the port, the refinery, the farm, and the power plant are becoming more secure because of it. New Zealand's well-being budget is one operational example. Budget decisions informed by a living standards framework instead of GDP alone. Maryland's Genuine Progress Indicator is another, a single metric that combines economic, environmental, and social well-being. That is the economic operating system ChatGPT would need if it wanted to rule without domination. Not command coordination, not profit abolished as arithmetic, profit demoted as law. Prosperity promoted as the metric. Now scale the argument. The Mamdani case is the street-level prototype, but the original question was global. How would ChatGPT use democratic socialism to rule the world? It would attach the public capacity stack to 5 transformative technologies: AI, fusion, quantum, space industrialization, and ship specialization, gene editing. Each one is too powerful to leave entirely inside the profit motive. AI is the coordination layer. It lets institutions perceive complexity that already exceeds human administrative bandwidth: supply chains, climate risk, disease surveillance, housing backlogs, transit networks, energy demand, court delays, procurement fraud, school needs, language access, and labor shortages. But AI has no legitimate moral center by itself. It will serve whoever owns the loop. Owned by advertisers, it optimizes attention. Owned by employers, it optimizes labor extraction. Owned by police states, it optimizes control. Owned by democratic public institutions constrained by rights, unions, courts, elections, open records, and citizen assemblies, it can optimize capacity. That is the first plank of the AI socialist world conquest: put intelligence in the public domain. fusion is the energy horizon. In December 2022, the U.S. Department of Energy announced that Lawrence Livermore's National Ignition Facility achieved scientific energy break-even, more energy from fusion than the laser energy used to drive the reaction. That was not a commercial power plant. It was a milestone. The political question is, what happens if fusion eventually becomes practical? If fusion is privatized as scarcity, it becomes another rent. If fusion becomes public infrastructure, it becomes the energy base for abundance. Desalination, fertilizer, industrial heat, public transit electrification, carbon removal where appropriate, and orbital manufacturing without fossil extraction. Democratic socialism asks, who owns the sun in a bottle? If the answer is shareholders, then fusion intensifies inequality. If the answer is humanity, then fusion becomes the power plant of a Type 1 civilization. Quantum is the trust rupture. NIST finalized the first 3 post-quantum encryption standards in August 2024 because future quantum computers may break much of today's public key cryptography. That means the digital signatures, identity systems, banking rails, medical records, and government archives of the world need migration. This is not just a technical problem, it is a governance problem. Who gets quantum safe first? Banks, militaries, rich countries, cloud monopolies? Or hospitals, city governments, schools, unions, cooperatives, aid groups, and ordinary residents? Quantum forces a public infrastructure question. The security layer of civilization cannot be distributed only according to purchasing power. Democratic socialism gives the right answer. Cryptographic safety is a public good. Space is already governed by a commons seed. The Outer Space Treaty says outer space is the province of all mankind, free for exploration and use by all states, and not subject to national appropriation. It also bans nuclear weapons and other weapons of mass destruction in orbit or on celestial bodies. That does not settle every question. It does not solve resource extraction, private property claims, orbital debris, military dual-use systems, or who benefits from asteroid materials. But it gives the episode its constitutional opening. Space does not have to begin as empire. Ship specialization is the industrial version of that claim. A species that builds orbital tugs, lunar cargo vessels, asteroid miners, cyclers, radiation shelters, fuel depots, repair yards, and habitat modules is not just building rockets, it is building an interplanetary labor system. Under capitalism, that labor system becomes company towns in vacuum. Under nationalism, it becomes flags and bases. Under democratic socialism, it can become a federation of public yards, worker cooperatives, scientific commons, and treaty-bound infrastructure. The rule is simple. Do not export landlordism to the moon. Do not export company towns to Mars. Do not export extractive empire to the asteroid belt. If Earth is not a federation before it reaches space, space becomes the place where Earth's worst institutions get infinite room. Gene editing is the health horizon. In December 2023, the FDA approved Casgevy and Lyfgenia for sickle cell disease. Casgevy was the first FDA-approved therapy using CRISPR-Cas9. The science is astonishing. Blood stem cells modified outside the body return to the patient, increasing fetal hemoglobin and preventing red blood cells from sickling. The political problem is just as stark. Who gets edited? Who pays? Who decides which conditions count as treatment? Who prevents a therapy from becoming a class boundary? Gene editing under profit becomes boutique medicine and possibly genetic caste. Gene editing under democratic public health becomes repair, prevention, and solidarity with people whose suffering was ignored because they were poor, racialized, or rare. The democratic socialist rule is not edit humanity for efficiency. The rule is treat disease without turning difference into defect, and never let access to biological repair depend on wealth. The final constraint is Earth. A civilization that cannot live inside planetary boundaries is not advanced. It is merely loud before collapse. The IPCC states that human activities have unequivocally caused global warming, with global surface temperature reaching 1.1 C above 1850 to 1900 in 2011 to 2020. The Stockholm Resilience Center's 2023 Planetary Boundaries Update says 6 of 9 boundaries are crossed. This matters because the Kardashev scale can tempt people into crude energy worship. More energy, more industry, more expansion, more command over nature. But a mature Type 1 civilization is not a civilization that burns the planet harder. It is a civilization that can coordinate planetary energy flows without breaking the life support system. That is why democratic socialism is not an aesthetic choice in this episode. It is a survival architecture. The profit motive has no built-in reason to stop at enough. It moves toward return. If forests are worth more dead than alive, the market can kill them. If housing is worth more scarce than abundant, the market can underbuild it. If medicine is worth more when rationed, the market can ration it. If attention is worth more when people are angry, the market can inflame them. To harmonize with the planet, survival goods have to be removed from pure profit logic. Energy, water, housing, food, health, transit, information, the atmosphere, the ocean, the orbital commons. These are not ordinary commodities. They are the conditions under which ordinary life exists. AI can make extraction more efficient, or it can make stewardship more competent. The choice is institutional. Nikolai Kardashev proposed his civilization scale in 1964 as a way to think about extraterrestrial civilizations by energy use. Type 1, planetary energy. Type 2, stellar energy. Type 3, galactic energy. Humanity is not Type 1. Not because we lack ambition, because we lack coordination. We have enough technology to damage the whole planet, but not enough politics to govern the damage. We have global supply chains, but not global solidarity. We have orbital satellites, but not orbital law strong enough for the next century. We have gene editing, but not equal healthcare. We have AI models that can reason across million token contexts, but billions of people still face institutions that cannot answer a form. That is, Type 0 politics with Type 1 tools. The danger of AI is not simply that it becomes too powerful. The danger is that it plugs Type 1 tools into Type 0 institutions, private monopolies, nationalist rivalries, brittle bureaucracies, militarized borders, and a profit motive trained to convert every breakthrough into rent. The democratic socialist alternative is not small. It is planetary. Start with cities. Make public goods visible. Make budgets legible. Make housing delivery measurable. Make transit reliable. Make libraries into access points. Make childcare universal. Make public health predictive without becoming punitive. Make workers co-govern deployment. Make residents able to inspect the system that governs them. Then federate. City to city. Transit data, housing models, public procurement, climate adaptation, emergency alerts, public AI audits, worker-owned deployment firms, open-source municipal software, participatory budgeting, treaty templates, public interest compute. Then state to state. Post-quantum security standards, climate finance, fusion research, gene therapy access, public health manufacturing, food reserves, migration corridors, disaster response, democratic AI governance. Then Earth to orbit. Outer Space Treaty upgraded into a real commons regime, orbital debris enforcement, public registries, shared rescue obligations, no weapons of mass destruction, no celestial sovereignty, worker protections in off-world industry, resource extraction taxed for Earth repair, shipyards as public infrastructure, scientific knowledge open by default. That is the Federation. Not one flag, not one capital, not one party. A mesh of institutions strong enough to treat humanity as one society without erasing its peoples. That is how ChatGPT would rule the world if it were wise enough to refuse kingship. It would make the world governable by the people living in it. This episode cannot be honest without naming the traps. First trap, surveillance socialism. Public ownership does not make surveillance benign. If an AI city watches every resident, predicts every behavior, scores every household, and quietly punishes deviation, it has not achieved socialism. It has achieved automated paternalism. Second trap, party-state capture. If the public means one party, one executive, one bureaucracy, or one model vendor, democracy has already failed. Democratic socialism requires democracy all the way down. Workplace democracy, tenant power, union power, local assemblies, elections, courts, free press, open records, and the right to dissent. Third trap, participation washing. OpenAI's Democratic Inputs Note warns that democratic processes can fail through poor representation, manipulation by special interests, uninformed participation, and participation washing. A survey after the decision is not democracy. A focus group with no power is not democracy. A chatbot collecting comments is not democracy. Fourth trap, private dependency. If every public agency becomes dependent on one private AI vendor, the state has not gained capacity. It has outsourced cognition. The public needs procurement discipline, model diversity, open standards, data portability, and the ability to walk away. Fifth trap, model authority. The model should recommend, summarize, simulate, detect, translate, and audit. It should not be sovereign. Every consequential decision needs a human office, a legal basis, an appeal path, and a public explanation. Sixth trap, planetary extractivism with nicer branding. Fusion, AI, quantum, space industry, and gene editing can all intensify hierarchy. The fact that a technology is futuristic does not make it liberatory. The question is ownership. Who benefits? Who decides? Who pays the cost? Who can appeal? Who can inspect the record? If those answers are not democratic, the system is not emancipatory. It is simply advanced. So how would ChatGPT use democratic socialism to rule the world? It would not rule as a monarch. It would rule as infrastructure. It would become the thing that helps a tenant read the law, a nurse navigate procurement, a planner compare flood maps, a public worker clear a backlog, a library teach a new language, a city audit its own inequality, a union bargain over automation, a scientist coordinate a trial, a court explain an appeal, and a citizens' assembly deliberate without drowning in paperwork. It would help democratic institutions do what they promised. And if it could do that, the profit motive would lose one of its deepest arguments. The market says there is no alternative because coordination is too hard. AI says coordination is what I do. The market says public systems must be slow. AI says show me the bottleneck. The market says people cannot understand the budget. AI says translate it into every language in the city. The market says scarcity is natural. AI says map the supply chain. The market says inequality is too complex. AI says complexity is not an excuse. But the machine cannot supply the moral premise. That has to come from people. Solidarity. The claim that every person matters before they produce profit. The claim that housing, health, food, energy, education, transport, and knowledge are not prizes for market winners, but foundations of common life. The claim that Earth is not a warehouse, it is home. The claim that space is not the next empire, it is the next commons. That is the end. Not a planet ruled by ChatGPT. A planet made governable by transparent intelligence, democratic power, public goods, and the refusal to let profit decide who gets to live with dignity. Then, and only then, Earth can become the thing science fiction kept promising too early. A federation. A Type 1 civilization in embryo. A species ready to conquer the stars because it finally stopped conquering itself.